It's KC 101, Saturday morning, and time for another edition of Saturday with Seniors, brought to you by FCCB's Tioga County offices, which are in Wellsboro, Mansfield, and Blossburg. FCCB is proud to sponsor Saturday with Seniors here on KC 101. First Citizens Community Bank, building better communities for over 150 years, member FDIC. And Linda Steger joins us in our studio here. And Linda, how are you?
I am good, Kevin. Thank you for the invite. This is going to be fun.
I think it is going to be fun. You came highly recommended from several people here.
Well,
now, you're a little younger than we usually do for Saturday with Seniors. Can I ask your age? Is it okay to ask on the radio?
Yes, thank you for saying I'm younger. I'm 70.
You're 70, yes. Most of our guests are 75 or older. Yes. Our oldest guest was Dr. Barrett at 101. Yes. Dr. Barrett, 101 years old.
He's one of my heroes.
Yes. I've really enjoyed talking with him, and everybody's had some great stories to tell. So where does your story begin? Where were you born?
Oh, my goodness. I was born in Corning, New York, but my family lived in Nelson. Now, Nelson doesn't exist as I knew it and where I grew up. In the early 70s, after we had that big flood, most of Nelson was in fact taken away. And the houses were raised, and now that's where Ski Lake is. So my house, where it was, is gone. The trees are still there, the yard's still there, but not where I lived. And I lived there when I was real little. So I started at the Nelson School, which was on the flats, which is now definitely underwater. And it was a 3-room school back then. And so 1st and 2nd grade were together, 3rd and 4th grade were together, and 5th and 6th grade were together. And I did that basically for 1 year, basically 1st grade. Yeah. And then they bused us to Elkland. And so I was at Elkland for a long time, in fact. So I'm a Cowanesque Valley person. Loved growing up in Little Nelson. Everything seemed so big to me back then, and it wasn't. It was a little town.
Nelson, for the people that don't understand it, the flood of 72, Agnes brought Tioga County 15 to 20 inches of rain.
Yes.
It was devastating. If you go back in history, there was a ton of damage in this area. And Cowanesque Lake was put up after 1972, 73, somewhere in there.
Yes.
And they moved all of Route 49, and we're talking dozens of buildings that had to be, where they moved, torn down, and what's missing that was there?
When you're on Route 49 now, there's basically nothing left there other than, I think there's a garage there. But there used to be, my church was on Route 49, and you could turn right as you were headed west on Route 49 and go down across the mud flaps. They're still called the mud flaps now because they're muddy. And on that flat part was Ila Wiley's tobacco farm and the school. And then you came up across a wire grate bridge and then into Nelson proper, which had 4 corners. Waddy Swan's store was on the corner. My house was across, kind of kitty corner from the store and across from the post office. And the post office was just a little tiny 1-room building. And so the big deal was, you get on your bike and ride around Nelson, go up to the cemetery, which was about 1/8 of a mile, but felt like it was 10 miles.
Is the cemetery still there, or did that have to get moved?
Yes.
No, that stayed.
Part of the cemetery was moved, in fact, the lower part of it, but the upper part is still there. In fact, that's where my family's buried. All of my family, for the most part, are buried at the Nelson Cemetery, and so it's home still. I go back. Nelson has had a Memorial Day service for years, and it's just sort of good to go back and see relatives, see friends you see once a year.
Yeah, the folks at Lambs Creek have the same situation. There's a group that gets together that lost their home, too, when the lakes were put in on that end of things. You mentioned tobacco farms that were in there. I've always been curious about this. Do you know much about tobacco farming in that area? I know Tioga, there's some old tobacco barns that are there, and I don't think anybody's growing tobacco now in Tioga County, but it was a pretty big crop in that area, if I understand.
At the time it was.
I'm not sure.
Tobacco barns are kind of cool. If you've ever looked at them, and as a photographer I do, they have slats on the side. And so the whole side of the barn is these real narrow slats. And when you put the tobacco in, it has to air. So you open the slats to let the air
cross ventilation through
the barn. So it's cool to see, but no, I don't think we have any tobacco farms here locally anymore.
I don't know at what point they stopped growing tobacco around here and still grow in the south, but that was a major crop, I guess, back in the time.
Yes.
So very interesting. So from there, where did you move to next?
Well, my mom and dad had school buses in Nelson. So they were in the business of taking children to school. And they also had a charter bus business. And so they would take groups of people to Washington, D.C., for instance, and we'd all load on the bus and go to Washington or to Harrisburg or to the Howdy Doody show or wherever they were going at the time. Eventually, they licensed their buses to do those charters. They were the first folks, in fact, who had a license to do charter buses, and they had these school buses. Somewhere along the way, they bought the movie theater in Mansfield.
The Twain Theater.
Twain Theater.
Not named after Mark Twain.
Nope. Named after Mr. Swain and Mrs. Twain.
Twain and Swain.
Yeah. So they had the movie theater there, and then eventually they bought the Mansfield restaurant, which became the Dutch Pantry in Mansfield. And they had the Greyhound and Trailways bus station there. And so eventually we moved to Mansfield, but we commuted for the longest time back and forth between Nelson and Mansfield. They had school buses in Mansfield also, and they also were always on the radio from the very beginning. I have a radio background, not that you'd ever know it, because I was the shy kid in this bigger-than-life family. My mom and dad had radio shows ever since I was tiny. They had telethons, they dabbled in TV for a while.
Local radio here in Tioga County?
Local radio here.
Yeah.
My dad was John Antonio.
I did not know that was your
I
your
know.
Dad.
Many people don't know that.
Respect for your dad.
Yes.
Boy, the accomplishments of your dad and
There
radio,
you go.
what he put together.
You know.
Yeah.
You know. But I was the shy child in this bigger-than-life family. And I grew up with a microphone in my face. That's kind of how it was. Didn't say that I liked it a whole lot, but I did it, and it was okay. On the other hand, being shy, I wasn't really very glib at talking, whether it was in person or in front of a microphone. When I was in 8th grade, my dad and mom actually bought a radio station in Arizona. KPGE in Page, Arizona was our radio station, and we had that for about a year. I didn't like Arizona very much at all, and so we moved back, which I was very happy. And then Dad was involved with a lot of different radio stations here. Certainly WGCR was the original station that they were
Grand
involved
Canyon
with.
Radio when it was
there you go.
in Mansfield.
Yep. And then eventually he was on WNBT. And then after my mother died, she died very young. She was 53 when she died.
Effie was her name?
Effie was her name. Yep. EFFIE.
John spoke
and Effie.
so often of her and built WLH in her memory.
There you go. You know. And that's the story. After my mom died, my dad was so distraught that he wanted to do something so special for her. And what he knew was radio. In spite of the buses and the movie theater and everything else, he knew radio. He was a first-class broadcast engineer, in fact. He knew how to build radio stations.
I think he had the longest-running radio show at the point that he was, the final part of his days of doing radio from Dunham's out of anybody, like in the history of radio.
Sure.
I mean, I really want to do more research on it, but yeah.
He was very active in radio.
I'm so impressed that's your dad.
And also very active in the community. And some folks know that. Certainly he was an entrepreneur. He had businesses and he had the radio and the movie theater. Many kids in Mansfield, my age, grew up at the movie theater. Saturday matinees at the movie theater were something very special. And on Saturday afternoon, we all went to the movies, and my dad had a live stage show in the afternoon at the movie theater. There was a stage there in front of the screen, and he would get up and do this live broadcast show of games for children. And so there would be twist contests, and there would be contests where you chewed up crackers and then saw if you could whistle afterwards. And all of these things that kids love to do. And every year, my birthday is in November, we would have a birthday party for me at the movie theater. And the admission to the matinee was basically a toy for children. And so kids would come, bring their toys, and then the toys would be donated to Children's Services, which was, in fact, at the time, the Child Welfare Agency here in Wellsboro. Now, interestingly, I grow up, go to Mansfield University. I actually graduated from Mansfield High School. In fact, we did move to Mansfield eventually. Graduated from Mansfield University. Couldn't decide quite what I wanted to do in life. I did take sociology, anthropology, and I decided that most jobs required you to talk a lot, but social work didn't. Social work, you listened. And so I became a social worker at Children's Services, where all of those toys used to go for my birthday parties. And I eventually became a caseworker in Wellsboro. Worked for Ina Tabor and learned the ropes and tried to do good things. Now, I worked in human services here in Tioga County for 40 years, and I can say that we did important things. I hope we did good things. You know, the whole idea was to help people do better in life, to heal their troubles, to get services that they needed, and to do better. I hope we did that. I'm not sure that we always did. I think we made mistakes. I think we did the best we could. And so some folks might be listening to this and say, oh, she worked for them. And all I can say is we tried our best. And I felt like we did the best we could with very important work.
Yep. Anytime you've got government stuff and red tape, any one person is limited to what they can do, but I'm sure you did everything you could.
Sure.
Those limitations.
Yep.
Let's go back to the theater for a minute, the
Yep.
Twain Theater, because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening. What year did that theater disappear? 70s?
Oh, my
probably?
goodness. My mom died in 1981, and they probably closed the theater in 1980 because she was too sick, and they always ran it together. I helped some after I got my job here as a caseworker, but they couldn't run it, and Dad actually took care of Mom to the end.
So this is, the theater ran till 19. How old was the theater? Was it a one-screen theater? Do you remember about how big it was? I mean,
oh my goodness.
Was it a 100-year-old theater or
no? It was probably started in the mid-40s.
And it's where the Borough building in Mansfield's parking lot is now, right? Between where the hotel is and the Borough building, that parking lot.
Yep. And it was a single-screen theater. Probably, I'm going to guess, 200 seats in the theater. I'm not really sure.
At that point, there was a theater in Wellsboro, Blossburg, which is reopened in the last year, the Victoria. Yep. Mansfield had a theater. Yep. And where else was there movie theaters then? Canton, Troy, I believe, had a theater at that time.
Yes, you know, those were the good old days when we went to the movies.
And roller skating.
And roller skating rink. And oh my goodness, you know, Henrietta's roller skating rink down on South Main. You know, that's where I grew up, was roller skating. But also, you know, working at the movie theater and so forth. And it was just a good time. And my dad had Johnny's Fun Club. And we had a pledge. And I wish I could remember. It was, I promise to be the best I can be, to be kind to other people.
Almost like a scout, kind, obedient, thrifty, the whole... Yeah.
And so at the beginning of the show, we stood up and said our pledge that we were going to be good kids. And then we celebrated the show together, and then we watched a movie. Whatever it was, whether it was Superman or the Three Stooges or whatever, we spent the afternoon at the movie theater. And I think that was one of my dad's purest traits, was just his ability to bring out the good in things. Yeah. Whether it was the community, he was on the borough council at Mansfield, you know, he did things here. In fact, most folks don't know, and that was in a different day. So you take this with a grain of salt, okay? But we know where Route 15, future Interstate 99, is now. It goes through Mansfield. There was never a plan for it to go through Mansfield. It was supposed to go to Trout Run and turn and go up 14 to Troy and to Elmira. And one day, my dad got a call from Harold Strait. And Harold Strait owned...
I've seen his name on a bridge or a road somewhere in Tioga County.
Exactly. Strait's Hardware in Mansfield. And my dad was on the borough council, and my dad tended to drive Harold where he needed to go. And Harold said to my dad, we have to go to Washington today. We have to be there tonight. What Harold had found out was in some back boiler room meeting, the decision was going to be made about Route 15's location. And so they went to Washington. And by the next morning, things were lined up that the Harold Strait Highway, which is outside Mansfield, was to be. And you think about the good and bad of that. Certainly there was some bad in it, but you think about the economy and how many people have come to Tioga County. And that's part of what I think we need to celebrate as residents of Tioga County, is how good it is here. My dad used to say, he always started his radio show with, "It's a beautiful day in Tioga County." He got that from Pete Wambach's motto, "It's a beautiful day in Pennsylvania." He took that from him. And so every radio show always started with, "It's a beautiful day in Tioga County." Well, now that I am a part of the community and older, and I do a lot of photography, that's what I do these days in my retirement. Every photograph I share is a tribute to my dad saying, "It's a beautiful day
in Tioga
County." Okay? So good things are here.
Yep.
And we need to do everything each of us can do to protect what we have here, but also to celebrate what we have here and to make sure that everybody gets to see what we have. Because it's such a special gift here. It really is.
It is. I've lived at 7 different addresses, and I've chose this as my final address, and that was 26 years ago. We're going to be right back. You're listening to Saturday with Seniors. Each Saturday morning at 10 a.m., we talk to local senior citizen about growing up in our area. It's sponsored by FCCB's Tioga County offices in Wellsboro, Mansfield, and Blossburg. You can hear this and all prior Saturday with Senior episodes on our YouTube channel, which you can easily get to through our website, kc101fm.com. First Citizens Community Bank, building better communities for over 150 years, member FDIC, and we'll be right back. And we are back on Saturday with Seniors, brought to you again by FCCB's Tioga County offices in Wellsboro, Mansfield, and Blossburg. FCCB is proud to sponsor Saturday with Seniors on KC101. First Citizens Community Bank, building better communities for over 150 years, member FDIC. And when you were a kid, First Citizens in Mansfield was right on the original building, probably right in the corner. First Citizens had 3 buildings, I think, since you were...
Yes, the building that we recognize now is not where it was. In fact, Mansfield, as I was growing up, we had a diner, very much like the Wellsboro Diner in Mansfield. After school, we'd go either to the diner or to the Mansfield restaurant, and do the same thing that kids always do after school, drink Coke and chat about our day.
What were some of the other stores on Main Street? When you think back about what was there was the Green Stamp store, there was a few hardware stores, if I remember right.
Yep. I'll tell you my favorite store. Ernie Upenlaz's Horse and Harness store. Do you remember that?
I do, kind of, I believe, because there was where the insurance place is now, where Farmers Insurance is, there was a leather works place now that had been there for over 100 years.
Ernie Upenlaz was a skinny little guy who looked like a cowboy. And you went into his store and it smelled so good. It smelled like leather. So between his oils and the raw leather there, you could just go in. And as a kid, he was always nice to me. He let me come in and look at everything. Of course, I always wanted a horse growing up. And so I would go in there and pretend, that maybe that might be my saddle and that might be my bridle and so forth. And he was always good. The other store, do you remember Jimmy Caracciolo? He was a cobbler. He repaired shoes.
I don't remember a cobbler in Mansfield. That was before 1995, I'm guessing.
He was next to Hartsock's Bakery. So it was basically Mansfield Restaurant, Ernie Vosberg's restaurant. That's the restaurant that we bought. And then going
up. And this is on south of Light, Mansfield, TW Judge Company area.
Going towards the intersection, there was a little newsstand. There was Jimmy's Shoe Shop. The bakery was there. Great brownies. Good food. And then eventually you came up to TW Judge, which was the department store, much like Dunham's here, had furniture and different things. And then eventually up to Cole's Pharmacy. Mr. Cole was the pharmacist there. That's where we got our prescriptions filled and so forth. That was our little neighborhood in Mansfield.
That's just one side of the light.
And that's just the one side.
Garrison's Men's Shop, also in Mansfield, and the other side at that time.
Katie's Men's
hardware store.
Mr. Katie, yep.
Yep.
And then as you went up, wasn't there this shoe shop? Who was that?
Well, Charlie
Fish.
had the shoe store before
Well,
Fish.
okay,
Yeah.
yep.
There was a green GNS store, green stamp
Right,
store down at
there
the end
was.
that burned down that
Yep,
building and
yep,
next to
yep,
where the coffee
yep.
shop is now.
We all saved green stamps. Did you
Yep.
save green stamps? I did.
I
when
remember
was a
seeing
kid.
them,
Oh, my
but
goodness.
that's the little
Oh,
card
yeah.
you stuck them on and
We
you cover the whole
saved.
card.
We could
and
go in and pick out something depending on how many books we had. Yes, awesome.
You mentioned roller skating early
Yep.
before. Seems like kids had more to do then. They go to the movie theater. They went roller skating instead of looking at their phones. How busy
Yes.
was roller skating? Was that a popular thing? It
Yes.
seems like so many people have fond
Yes.
memories talking backwards about that.
It was. In fact, that's what you did sometimes is go roller skating, and it was always busy. Sometimes at night, they would have different events at the roller skating rink, but they always played music.
Yep.
And so they had, sometimes it might be a particular type of music that they would play, and you went around and around and around. And you learned to
Yep.
cross your feet when you went around the corner, and you learned to go backwards. And,
Yep.
there were couple skates and
Yep.
girl skates and boy skates and
And all the entertainment of coming together as a group.
Sure, exactly.
Parades back then and everywhere. I look at old
Yes.
pictures of parades. I don't care what town it is. There were so many more people at the parades then. Do you remember
Yes.
as a kid going to the parades and there
Yes.
being 2-3 people deep, the whole, both sides, everything?
Well, Mansfield always had the 4th of July parade, but then we also had the homecoming parade for Mansfield University that came up through in October. So we got 2 parades a year for sure in those early days, which was always fun.
And the Great Mansfield Fair. Do you go back far enough to remember the Great Mansfield Fair? That ended just before the Tioga County Fair. So I'm thinking we're the 60s we're talking about here. Early
I barely
60s.
remember the county fair. What I remember most, I don't remember so much the buildings there. I think most of the buildings were raised before I was old enough to see that. But certainly we had carnivals. The big circus tent would come in
Yep.
with the circus under the big tent, and we'd all go to the circus and see them come through. And the carnivals were always at Smythe Park. That's where we did
Yep.
it.
And Putnam Park back in the day, do you go back far enough to remember when Putnam Park was...
Probably not. I know
actually
where it
had
was.
rides there. I mean, when I was here, there was a bar back in the days, but
yes,
you've gone
that's
back
what I
even further,
remember.
somewhere in the 50s, 60s, they had a
Nope.
couple of merry-go-rounds and things there. And
Don't remember that.
I'll have to,
No.
if anyone else listening is a guest old enough to remember that, get in touch with me. I'd love to hear
Yes.
from them. So, wow. So what do you think about today's world versus the world in the past here?
I think we are very blessed to still have our own little culture.
You were
here
kind
in
of the last of
Tioga
that little culture. You
County.
started off in the small couple-room schoolhouse, one of the
Yeah.
last of the generations to do that. And then, did you have a TV growing up?
Yes, a black and white little tiny TV set. Eventually we got a color set. The color wasn't very good. But remember, living in Nelson, the only thing we had were those antennas.
Yeah, you
could
got
put out
Elmira
the-
with a little
and
bit
then
of
you had
static.
to turn
Yeah.
the antenna to point it the right direction. So somebody would be outside turning the antenna, and you'd be inside watching the TV screen saying, "Oh, it's snowy. Oh, it's better now, better now."
I don't think kids know the term snowy, even what that means now, let alone what a VHS tape is. So, I mean,
I know.
the world has changed a lot. So,
Yes.
it certainly has.
But we are very lucky to be here, let me tell you. And, where else? Well, I'm sure there are plenty of little towns, little rural Americana towns that still fly the American flags,
Yep.
that still have parades, whether it's the Laurel Festival parade or whether
Where
it's
tradition goes on.
It's the Memorial Day parade right up through town, that there are still these little town traditions that we still hold here in Tioga County, whether it's the county fair, which is amazing. If people have not been to the county fair, they need to go and soak up that
They need to
tradition.
look where they don't always look. There's
Exactly.
so much more stuff at the fair.
Exactly.
Go into the 4-H building. Go into the
Exactly.
see the quilts on display, and then behind that, the Tioga County History Museum is back
Yes.
there. A farming
Yes.
museum, and that I don't know how many people go to the fair and have no idea it's even back there.
Yeah, my dad always went to the fair every day and did his radio show, usually on Fair Week from the fair, and would call people in saying, "Hey,
Yep.
come on, get on the radio with me, let's talk." And in the older days, as he grew much older and frailer, I would go with him. And then I'd walk him around and just listen to his stories about the tractors and about the farming implements and about growing bunnies and turkeys and corn. And
if I could time travel and do this show with your dad 20 years ago, that would be like, he would be my number one
would
guest.
Would have been fun.
Yes.
Would have been fun.
Well, Linda, I appreciate you taking the time to share some of your stories when you were younger. Linda Steger joining us here on KC 101, Saturday with Seniors. And a big thank you to our sponsor, First Citizens Community Bank, FCCB's Tioga County offices, sponsoring today's show in Wellsboro, Mansfield, and Blossburg. And if you missed any of the show or any of our previous shows, we've got about 15 episodes now. You can get to them through our website. You can get to our YouTube channel through there, kc101fm.com. First Citizens Community Bank, building better communities for over 150 years, member FDIC. And any closing thoughts you want to share before we send you off?
First of all, thank you. Let's start there.
Thank you. Thank you
for the opportunity to reminisce and to really celebrate us here in Tioga County. You do great work, and I love listening to your radio station. I love your live work, and these kinds of shows are so important to commemorate the past and also to celebrate what we have here.
And document it for years to come.
Exactly.
And what were
good job.
The famous words that your dad always said? It's a beautiful day in Tioga County?
It's a beautiful day in Tioga County.
Well, I love those words. My words, we all have the power to brighten someone's day.
There you go.
One day that popped in my head along the same thing. So
there you go.
Love where you are and help people out along the way, and I think you'll be living the life of both of us.